What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some advice that I feel all quarterbacks need to hear. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you're a QB and you guys would like to get some work in with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we're going to be traveling out to 14 more states across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So next up on our camp tour, we'll be coming out to Orlando, Florida. That camp is unfortunately sold out. But then we'll be heading out to Phoenix, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles, California. So if you guys are local to one of those cities, would like to get some work in with us, 2 days of training, 8 hours of total in a small group setting, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out there, fellas. Let's get started with this video. So this first example here is going to be from Zach Wilson. Now, this is one of the biggest mistakes that I feel all quarterbacks make, and that is pushing off of their back foot, or most quarterbacks make, I should say. So when you guys throw, your power does not come from this back foot. We are not pitchers in baseball. We are not trying to push off of the rubber. We are trying to rotate at my hips and transfer weight from my quad. That is where my power comes from. So we're going to show this example here from Zach Wilson, and this is where you get a little bit of an overstride. So how many of you have probably heard that phrase, oh, you're a quarterback, we don't want to overstride? That's where you take a big and kind of a long step with your front foot. Now, what that does is that is going to prevent you from rotating at your hips and getting power from your hips. Essentially, when you overstride, you are throwing all with your upper half, which is not healthy for your elbow, healthy for your shoulder, and it makes your release point very inconsistent. So let's talk about what the causes of that. So when we're in the pocket to be able to generate power, we have to get to a good pre-throw position. And Zach Wilson is in that pre-throw position. His back foot is underneath his back shoulder. His shin is straight. His back knee is not caved inward. His weight is loaded on that back leg. This is the spot that we want to try to get all quarterbacks to get to, because when you get to this position, if you take a quick stride, you can shift weight from your back quad, your hips can rotate through because your feet are not in a super wide base to where you won't be able to rotate, and when your weight is loaded back like this, you could get a good close of your front shoulder. So Wilson starts out great. He's in a great position to make a throw here. He starts to rotate his front side, he starts to close that front shoulder, putting him in a position where the hips can go through first, and he's able to generate torque. Kind of like how a pitcher hits a baseball. You take a, or I'm sorry, baseball player hits a baseball. You take a step with the front foot. You keep the bat loaded, and the hips bring the bat through. That's essentially what we want. But when you are in this position, it is very, very easy to take a long front stride if you push off of your back foot. And that is one of the old cliche things that a lot of quarterback coaches would say. To get more power, oh, you want to push off the inside arch of your back foot, push off the Nike logo. But when that back foot is underneath your shoulders like this, and we got to be able to get to that position because that's where I could get hip rotation, you can get a long stride. So you see when Wilson takes this long stride, what happens to his base? His base gets very wide. And when your base is wide and your feet are outside of your shoulders, you're not going to be able to rotate at your hips. We're going to show an example of Trevor Lawrence here in a second, taking a quick stride so you guys can have a better idea of what this should look like. But I want to break this down first so you know what I'm talking about. So when he pushes off of this foot, that causes an extension with the back leg. So that extension with the back leg is not good because that is not going to allow your hips to rotate. Your hips are going to get stuck because your back leg is essentially getting stuck. So in your throwing sequence, you see how Wilson pulls that front elbow down, and that is what causes his release to get pushed up high. But also what happens is his shoulders are coming through the throwing plane before his back hip does. And that is what's going to make you lose power as a quarterback. And it was all dictated from that front stride. That front stride, having that long overstride, is what caused the problem. So let's go back to the very beginning. To be able to generate power and torque, what I would like to see from him is I would like to see the same type of shoulder close. I love what his upper half is doing, and he's able to do that because he started in a good pre-throw position. When your weight is loaded on the back leg, it makes it very easy for you to rotate with your front side. Because to generate power, we have to have something called hip and shoulder dissociation. So what hip and shoulder dissociation is when your shoulders go back and your hips are going through. So you have to have weight onto your back leg to even start with that position, to even get your shoulders to go back. If your weight is distributed on your front side, if you have about 60 to 70% of weight on your front leg, you can't rotate your front shoulder. So being loaded back here, this being under your frame is great. Now, when you go back with those shoulders, that's where we need to get that front foot down. So that front foot should be getting down essentially like right now. Because when he goes back, with those shoulders and that front foot's in the ground, that's when those hips can rotate through. But when that stride takes a long time to get down, those hips can't rotate. So what ends up happening is the shoulder or the throwing sequence, your kinetic sequence is off. Your throwing sequence, because of that hip and shoulder dissociation, like I said, your front stride needs to get down, then the front hip should come open, back hip should drive through, and because your shoulders are back, then the shoulders should go through, then the ball. But because we take the long stride, your front stride gets down first, but we're not in a position to rotate. So like I said, those shoulders end up beating those hips. And when those shoulders beat the hips, that's where you get elbow pain. That's where you get shoulder pain because you're now throwing all upper body. Now, I mentioned it before. You see how his elbow kind of pulls down to his hip. Now, the reason why the elbow pulls down is because that's the only source of power that we have as a quarterback when I'm not able to rotate at my hips. Because as quarterbacks, we're rotational athletes. You want to pretend like you got a pole going down the middle of your back and we were just trying to rotate down the pole. You're trying to keep your front side stable. But when I negate the hip rotation because of the long stride, my only source of power is this front elbow. But that will bring you off of that imaginary pole down the middle of your body. I call it the midline. So when your elbow pulls down like this, watch what happens to his release point. His release point gets pushed up high. So when your release point gets pushed up high, you release it too early, where's the ball going to go? Going to sail high. You release it too late, where's the ball going to go? Down in the grass. You're throwing like a pitcher almost when you swing that elbow down. And all of that, fellas, is dictated by this front stride. Not having that 6-inch front stride to get it down in the ground to be able to rotate at your hips. So let's play this full speed one more time so you guys can see it. And then, like I said, we're going to show an example of Trevor Lawrence taking a quick front stride and how he's able to drive with his hips. So this is an example of Trevor Lawrence throwing here. And he's got great hip rotation on this. He's able to stay square. He doesn't need to pull his front elbow down solely because of where his front stride is. Your front stride is everything. Fellas, quarterbacks, a lot of times everybody loves to talk about arm slots, throwing sidearm, inventing arm slot, all that stupid stuff that you see all over the place. But they forget to tell you about the legs and how much the legs, the hips, the weight transfer, the foot strike, all of that ties into that. Because when you leave that part out and guys just start trying to change up arm slots, throw sidearm, all this stupid stuff, and they don't use their legs, they're very, very inconsistent. And they've experienced a lot of elbow pain and shoulder pain when they're not using their lower half. So just make sure that we remember that. So let's talk about it. First example here, where's Trevor Lawrence's back leg? Underneath his frame, his weight is back because that allows him to do what? That allows him to get his hips to rotate through, and that allows him to close his front side. So when he goes to transfer his weight, you see when his front foot hits the ground. Front foot's hitting the ground, his shoulders are closed. So now that's the position we want to get to. In this position, when your front foot gets down, it hits the grass, and you're transferring weight from your back leg, what do you think is going to come through first? The hips are going to come through first. So you see how his front hip is opening. His back hip is driving. His back leg is not extending out. He's able to turn this thing over and drive the knee through. And look at his throwing sequence. His front foot is able to get down. And then what's supposed to happen next in that kinetic sequence? Then the hips are supposed to be able to go through. And then what happens next? Shoulders are here. Ball is trailing my back hip. That is the position that we want to get to, fellas. And you see, he's able to keep his hand up by his face. He doesn't need to pull his elbow down. His arm slot's in a good spot. It's not way up high and having this super high release point, all because he got that front foot down in the grass. So he's not pushing off the back foot, fellas, for power. He is shifting that weight, getting the front foot down. You guys want to drive off of your quad, not off of your foot. You want to drive off of your quad. If you guys can shift that weight, get the front foot down, and because you're in a good pre-throw position, you keep your shoulders back, those hips are going to rip through, bringing the ball through effortlessly with no pressure on the elbow, no pressure on the shoulder, and you'll be a much more consistent passer. Again, you can just look at the freeze frame photo. Hip is coming through, ball is trailing behind. We go back to the last example with the overstride. You see, ball is coming through here. I know it's up top, but ball is coming through here. Hip is trailing behind the ball. We want the ball chasing my hip, not my hip chasing the ball. Let's play this next example from Trevor Lawrence full speed. This is a textbook mechanical throw with a great front stride, great hip rotation, and great throwing sequence, fellas. That is what you should try to emulate. Now, I say that, but I'm not saying you got to throw the ball the exact same way as Trevor Lawrence. You have to do the similar things that you see him do and so many other great quarterbacks do, like front foot strike, hip rotation, keeping your shoulders and your weight back. All of those things will tie into your own motion in your own way. Everybody throws the ball differently, and that's what you have to keep in mind. Now, next throw I want to talk about here is the throw on the run, because I feel like a lot of quarterbacks struggle with their ability to be accurate on the run, and it all comes from your throwing side foot. So we talked a lot about hips. We talked a lot about hip and shoulder dissociation in those last two examples. So on the run, you want to try to be able to generate the same exact thing. So let's play this full speed. This is an absolute rope here from Justin Herbert, rolling on the run to the right, and he's able to put that ball right where only his guy could get it. Right? So he's able to put that thing to the inside so his guy can turn with it and make a catch when he's right on the sideline. So how is he able to do that? How is he able to be so accurate? And it comes from your throwing side foot and the timing of your sequence. So remember, when you guys take a front stride, like you step with your left foot, your front foot in the throwing motion, normal throwing motion from the pocket, what are you supposed to do with your shoulders? You're supposed to rotate them back. You're supposed to go back so we have that hip and shoulder dissociation. So on the run, it's the same thing, but you step with the opposite foot because you are moving and you're throwing on the run. So we have momentum. We're attacking the target. We want to step with my right foot and point my toe exactly where I want that ball to go, because that is what's going to load your hips. When you see Herbert turn that toe towards the inside, his hips go towards the inside as well. And now when you're running and you step like that, it's a solid step. You turn your hips, your shoulders go back. What do you think you're in a position of now? It starts with a T. Torque. Because when you have hips going through, shoulders going back, that's that dissociation, that like baseball swing, if you will, that separation between upper and lower half, and that's where that power comes from. So you see now when he kicks through, his hips and shoulders are exactly where he wants the ball to go. His shoulders can stay level, his hand can stay by his face. He pointed that toe, so now his release point's in a good spot, and you see how when he finishes on this throw, that ball is exactly where he wants it to be. There are probably thousands of quarterbacks across the country that in this scenario, when they're rolling right, they would throw that ball out of bounds. They would not be able to turn that throw and make it go to the inside because that throwing side toe would not turn, loading the hips to the target. If he was trying to throw this thing to the sideline, all he would have to do is point that toe towards the sideline, because then his hips would get there and you keep your shoulders, the leg kick, everything the same. But your accuracy on the run, fellas, is dictated by that foot. Obviously, after you step, we can't have that front foot like just stop, drag in the grass, kick to the sideline. You have to make sure that you kick that toe towards the target to maintain the shoulders and hips staying square so we can be more consistent. Just like on a regular throw, we don't want to take that elbow and pull it down, just like how we don't want to take this leg kick and kick it across, because then my shoulders are going across and it's an across body throw. So we step towards the direction of the target with my toe. As I step, shoulders rotate, and then after icing on the cake, I kick through with my non-throwing side foot. Let's play this thing again from Justin Herbert. Great example here of how you guys can throw on the run and how you guys can be a more consistent passer when throwing on the run. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys as usual. And again, fellas, we are traveling out to 14 more states this offseason. Our San Francisco camp, we just got done with that last weekend. Great turnout. We appreciate everybody who attended. We sold that camp out. Our Orlando, Florida camp is sold out, but we have 13 more opportunities for you guys to train with us in Phoenix all the way to Los Angeles. So check out that very first link in the description below if you guys would like to get some work in with us. I'll see you guys next time.